I was saying to Rick, I chose the music myself. What's the music we're listening to?
That is the Babylon Mall by the Wonderful Grand Band.
The Wonderful Grand Band, the pride and joy of Newfoundland and Labrador.
That's right, the Wonderful Grand Band. The reason why everyone in show business in Newfoundland went into show business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's the reason we're all here.
That's exactly right.
So we crunched the numbers. I realized this. This is the first time in, check this out, 26 years, 8 federal elections that we're in the middle of a campaign and you're not on the air. Mm-hmm. What's it like to sit this one out?
Well, I'm not really sitting it out. I'm still ranting. I'm just doing it at my television instead of on the television. The neighbors may have filed a noise complaint. It's really interesting. You know, it's when you cover politics, you're obviously inside the bubble. And even when I wasn't on television, if an election happened to fall in a time that I wouldn't be on television, I would go to Maclean's magazine or some outlet to just get me out there because I was desperate to get out on the road and cover it. So it's obviously very different, but I'm finding the election fascinating like I usually find elections.
Are you missing it at all? Are there times you wish you could get on TV and flip out about something?
I guess so. I mean, at the beginning of the election, the Conservatives posted a meme that had me saying vote Conservative. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, I really wish I had a show this week because I didn't say that. And it would have been fun to have a way to correct that. But yeah, I miss it.
It is. It must be funny to be that must have been interesting for you to be off of television and still be sort of part of the political discourse as sort of a symbol by another party.
Well, it just came as a surprise, I guess, because I started getting, I looked and I was trending on Twitter and I was like, am I dead? Like, trending on Twitter is often a very bad sign. And I was like, why am I trending on Twitter? And it was because of this meme. And I guess I was flattered to a certain extent that they thought, that would, maybe move some votes, but I was more baffled that they thought they could get away with that.
Right, because I think throughout your career, I've always seen you as somebody who has been less directive about who to vote for and more about voting. You strongly believe in the act of voting.
Yeah. I never, ever told anyone how they should vote, but on the show, we did a lot of work. We got involved with the vote mobs, which were really exciting, and they were truly nonpartisan. They took place in every province and territory and, like 60 campuses, lots of students coming out, and those were such exciting demonstrations, and you very rarely saw a Liberal sign or an NDP or a Conservative or Green. It was always surprise, we're voting, we're voting, we're voting. And that spooked all the parties because the young people were just saying they were voting. And obviously I find it's something I'm very passionate about. I think I always voted. Now, I had an interest in politics from an early age, more so, say, than my brother and sister, but they also always voted. And I think why is because my parents voted. And more importantly, they took us to vote. And I think anyone who's listening, if they're going to vote, if at all possible, if instead of just stopping in after work and voting, if they can go home, get the kids, and then take them to vote, I think that makes the world a difference.
I think that absolutely. I'm not surprised to hear the applause. You're right. I remember going to my dad going to vote in the St. Matthew's gym in St. John's, Newfoundland.
Sure.
Picking me up from home and taking me to vote. That was an important thing to do. I never thought about that.
And you got to wear street shoes in a gymnasium in a school.
That right there is pretty exciting. But what do you think it is that keeps young people from voting?
Well, I think there is a little bit of that. I think if you're a young person and you don't have the example of people who vote, and you don't have the people talking about it, it's intimidating. You don't necessarily know how to go about voting, and if it's not something that's behavior that you've witnessed, it's easy to fall through the cracks. But we also know that voting it's learned behavior and it's addictive. If people vote, and the numbers are there, like if an election happens and there's a bunch of 18-year-olds and they vote, they're voters for life. That's why I believe the voting age should be 16. I know. People never know what to think about that.
Let's talk more about that. Tell me how you arrived there that the voting age should be lowered.
Well, you can join the Canadian military and go overseas. You probably won't get sent overseas, but you can certainly join the Army at 16. You can drive farm equipment. We expect you to follow the laws of the land and to understand them. 16-year-olds have responsibility. And I also think that it would be very exciting. Imagine if everyone in grade 12 voted.
Yeah.
That would be very exciting.
How would that change? How do you think that would change how the politicians talk to young people, or even the issues
Well,
that they present?
I would suggest
right?
that they might actually talk to young people. When was the last time you saw? Yeah.
I usually see them on
You go
commercials.
to Newfoundland and Seamus would be in the high school talking.
I usually see them on commercials during The Price is Right, you know?
Yes.
Them and Wilford Brimley trying to talk to me about diabetes or something like that. So what would that change if the voting age got lowered?
Well, I think that 16-year-olds, I think they would leap at the chance to vote, I believe. And like I say, it's habit forming. And if they vote, then they'll vote 4 years later. And then you have them. I don't know anyone who, I thought the panel on first-time voters was very interesting. And when I heard there was a panel of first-time voters, I was hoping it wouldn't be all 18, 19-year-olds.
Right.
I was really glad to hear that there was, a gentleman who was 32, because I think they're very few and far between. I think if you haven't voted and you're 30, you're probably never going to vote.
Right.
So we got to get them young.
You mentioned that you had a brother and a sister who weren't as politically engaged as you.
They're going to be so mad at. They're going to be like, we were engaged.
We watched Don Newman.
Yeah.
Don Newman, anybody remember Don Newman? Yeah, right. Okay, good.
Broadcast.
The broadcast. What happened to you, man? Like, what happened to you that you were into politics when you were like 7 years old? Everyone else was watching Dynasty, and you were watching the news.
I had a godfather who was my father's best friend, who I liked because he would talk to me like I was not 7 or 10, and I just liked him very much. He was one of my favorite adults, and he ran for the Liberal Party in Newfoundland, and then. No, he ran for the Conservatives, and then I think he crossed the floor within 2 days. And then he ran for the Liberals and was eviscerated, and then he ran for the leadership of both parties. He was what we call local color. But he was a great influence on me, and so also Dad would drag me down to these rallies where we would be chanting his name, and I found it all very exciting.
When did you realize that you were better suited to comment on politics than you were to actually run in them themselves? Because you must be approached, like it must happen.
Yeah, although I've never, I think if you cover politics, you always have this fantasy that it's like if politics is your baseball, you have this fantasy you're going to get this phone call to go in and become the general manager of the Blue Jays or something. Like, finally, I'll go in there. But I don't know if I've never really considered running for public office. I think I would like to. I admire people who do it later in life, actually, when they're 60 or something.
Yeah.
I'm not that impressed with these people who, not that I don't think there should be young people in politics, but I'm not that impressed with all of these, lifetime politicians.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there are these people who decide that, like at 19, they're working in a local constituency office, and they're just looking for a place that they can run, and then that's it. They're in there for like 25 years. I think that you need life experience. Maybe work in a cafe or something.
Yeah. Work at a job, do the job of the people that you're representing.
Yeah.
So let's go back to it. What made you decide that you had a proficiency for maybe commenting on these things?
I loved politics. I loved the effect it had on people, and I loved commentary because my father would drive me to soccer practice on Saturday mornings, and no one could talk because this fellow would go on CBC radio and do a song about politics, and then Dad's head would pop off.
It was Rex Murphy.
No, it wasn't Rex. And I thought, wow, you talk about politics, people get really worked up. I also believe politics matters, and I want good people to run, and they should be held accountable. So I always loved the fact that I had a format to talk about politics on a weekly basis.
So how do we do it? What's your solution here? We talked a little bit about lowering the voting age, but how do we get, kind of what we're here for. How do we get more people voting, engaged in the democratic process?
We were talking about this backstage a moment ago. In Australia, you have to vote. Mm-hmm. And they don't find that strange. Like, it's a very radical concept here, but, it's been going on in Australia for so long. And if you don't want to vote, like say you're Jehovah's Witness or something, you can fill out a form and you don't have to vote. So if you have real reasons why...
An actual objection, a conscientious
yes,
objection.
Then you can avoid voting. But why not? I would certainly entertain that because, we all understand that none of us want to do jury duty, but we get that it is our responsibility as citizens.
Right.
And we all get that, and we accept it. And we accept that we have to use red lights, and we don't run red lights. And there's all sorts of things that we are required to do as citizens. So why not be required to actually take 5 minutes out of your day every 4 years and have a say in who the Prime Minister of Canada is going to be.
But you got to think about people who are working. People can have a hard time getting out of their jobs in order to do this. I mean, there's also
advance polls for weeks.
And it's also been raised to give a holiday for voting.
Sure.
I'm not.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't want to go on record against a holiday, but I don't. You know, there's all sorts. Like, I haven't voted on election day in a very long time. I just always wander down the street and vote in an advance poll.
Right.
And I think more and more people are doing that all the time. Those advance polls are bigger and bigger.
So answer me this to close things off. You've lived in Toronto for how long now?
16 years.
And like me, you're a fellow Newfoundlander and Labradorian.
Yes.
Where are you voting in Newfoundland or in Ontario?
Well, I'm a resident of Ontario, so I'll be voting in Ontario.
Well, we'll miss your vote back home.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, the great Rick Mercer.
Thank you very much.
Applause.